All right. Good evening, everyone. Again, for those of you in person, and to those of you online, welcome to the public information meeting for Project 94-267, which involves the shared use path and pedestrian improvements on the Gold Star Bridge between the cities of New London and Groton. I'm Tracy Bray. I'm the project manager from the Connecticut DOT Major Structures Unit. And tonight, I'm going to start off with some housekeeping items, and then I will provide an overview of this project and kind of how it fits into the overall Gold Star Bridge program. And then I'll introduce the project team. We have quite a few members here tonight who will be available to answer questions at the end of the presentation. I'll turn it over after that to the lead engineers from our consultant engineering firms. We have folks from Close, Jensen and Miller, also known as CJM, the BL companies, and HNTB. And they will be going through the technical presentation tonight, describing all the details of this project. Again, I apologize. Yes, so at the conclusion of the technical presentation, we'll open it up to a live question and answer session where folks that are in person tonight and online can ask questions and provide your comments to us. So, yeah. So moving on to the next slide, please. We can jump to. I'll start with the housekeeping for those online. Next slide, please. Thank you. So for those joining through Zoom tonight, there are options for closed captioning as well as non-English translations. So to use these functions, click on the button at the bottom of your screen that says Show Captions. It's the CC button, and then click the speaking language that you would like from the list. Next slide, please. All right. Also, as we start out tonight, we'd like to remind everyone of your civil rights. Under Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, no person shall, on the basis of race, color, or national origin, be excluded from participation or subject to discrimination in the development of this project. We have a link here to the DOT's Office of Equity page, which has more information about your civil rights. Also on this slide, we have a link to a voluntary post-meeting survey and also a QR code. So those of you that are here with us tonight in person or even online, you can use your cell phone and take a picture of that QR code and it'll take you to the survey. This survey is an opportunity for you to rate us on accessibility of this meeting tonight, timing, how it all went, so that we can improve on future meetings. So we really appreciate your feedback so that we can, again, improve the process in the future. Let's see, okay. So the Connecticut Department of Transportation operates its programs and services without regard to race, color, and national origin in accordance with Title VI of the Civil Rights Act. Any person who believes she or he has been aggrieved by any unlawful discriminatory practice under Title VI may file a complaint with the Connecticut DOT. This slide has some more information as to who to contact at the DOT to file those complaints. This next slide is the same information translated into Spanish. I'll pause just a moment so that those who would like to can read through. Next slide. Thank you. So during the question and answer session, in-person attendees are invited to come up and either ask your questions in this microphone, or we do have one that we can pass to you, so just raise your hand. For those that are joining us virtually tonight, there are 3 ways in which you will be able to communicate with us. First off, you can send us an email at dot.goldsstarbridgeprojects@ct.gov. Or you can call us at 860-594-2020 and leave a message. When leaving a voicemail, please reference project 94-267. And lastly, if you've joined via Zoom, you can post your questions or comments in the Zoom Q&A feature. I'll go over how to use that in a couple of minutes. And last, at the end of the presentation, the project team will read the questions that are entered in the Q&A box and will provide responses. So after tonight, you can still reach out to us with comments and questions, either using the email address or the phone number that are on this slide. And the comment period will be open through July 8th, 2024. So to use the Zoom Q&A function, there is a little box at the bottom of the Zoom window that says Q&A, and it has word bubbles. Click on that and a new box should open where you can type in your questions. So type in your questions or comments and just hit enter. Again, those joining online can enter these questions or comments in this box at any point during the presentation. We will read and respond to questions at the end. And then if you are an audio only participant, dial *9 to raise and lower your hand. So the project team, this project is led by the Connecticut DOT Division of Bridges Major Structure Unit, and we have the support of our Major Highway Unit as well. They are helping us manage the approach sidewalk design. So from the Bridge Division, the team consists of Bart Sweeney, Division Chief of Bridges, Bao Chung, the Principal Engineer of the Major Structures Unit, Louis Alfonso, the Project Engineer in the Major Structures Unit, and Matthew Giannakopoulos, our right-of-way property agent, and then myself, the project manager. And then we also have Karen Isherwood from our Major Highway Unit. She's a project engineer. And then also David Mancini, who is the supervising engineer in the Major Highway Unit. Next slide, please. Now, from the consultant engineers, we have Tom Ryan, project manager, John Miller, project engineer, and Michael Giacovino, project engineer from Close, Jensen, and Miller. They're primarily focusing on the shared use path improvements that will be on the Gold Star Bridge itself. Next slide, please. And then we also have BL companies and H&TB. They're focusing on the approach sidewalk improvements. So we have Stephen Frazier, the senior project manager from BL, and Jason Ellis, project engineer from BL. And then we have Rudy Ranciamore, the highway lead, David Giel, traffic lead, and Samantha Sharp, roundabout lead from H&TB. So the shared use path connection across the Thames River has been in regional and state plans for a long time. So the purpose of this project is to provide multimodal transportation improvements between the cities of New London and Groton, and a safer crossing of the Thames River for bicyclists and pedestrians. So currently, as many of you know, the sidewalk on the southbound Gold Star Bridge is 5 feet wide, but at some points where there are overhead sign structures or light standers, it reduces even further to 3.5 feet wide. So this is just wide enough for a wheelchair to pass through. It's certainly not wide enough for bicycles passing each other. Also, the sidewalk is frequently used by ATVs and mopeds, even though they are prohibited from using it. And but they still do, and it is definitely a safety concern that we need to address. So the existing approach sidewalks are also too narrow for passing bicyclists or bidirectional traffic. And there are also areas where the grading is too steep and there's poor lighting throughout. Okay, next slide, please. So on this slide, we're showing the limits of the proposed path improvements in red. Starting in New London with connections to Bailey Circle and also William Street, and then crossing over the Gold Star Memorial Bridge on the Southbound Bridge, and then providing connections in Groton to Blyven Street and Riverview Avenue to the north and Bridge Street to the south of the bridges. The department is committed to providing these improvements to again provide a safer crossing of the Thames River and also to make it a more enjoyable experience than it currently is. Next slide, please. So, as I mentioned, there are a few different projects that are in the works for both Gold Star bridges, either on the Gold Star northbound bridge or the Gold Star southbound bridge. So just wanted to kind of give an overview of all those bridges, all those projects, and where this shared use path project fits in. So right now, there is a project on the northbound bridge that involves strengthening on the truss spans that's in construction. And that is anticipated to be completed in about a year by next June. Shortly after that, the next phase of the northbound rehabilitation project is anticipated to start. And that's anticipated to go from June 2025 to November 2029. That project involves the replacement of the deck on the northbound structure, and it also involves additional steel strengthening in the approach spans. To maintain vehicular traffic during the deck replacement, it's proposed that 2 I-95 northbound lanes are going to be crossed over to the southbound structure. And that's anticipated to be in place for about 3 years. In order to accommodate that crossover and the plans for the shared use path on the southbound bridge, a steel strengthening project on the southbound Gold Star Bridge is anticipated to start also in June 2025. The shared use path project is then anticipated to start in spring 2028. And that is after the 2 lanes of 95 northbound that were crossed over are back on the northbound bridge. This is to maximize safety for the traveling public as well as construction workers during construction. And then the shared use path is anticipated to be completed in fall 2029. So ultimately, the goal is that we have the shared use path, I-95 northbound and I-95 southbound, open to traffic by the end of 2029. We have our link on that page. We'll share it again at the end, but that is the link to the project website, which has additional information, the presentations for the other projects and any meeting minutes in the future. So at this point, I'd like to turn it over to Michael Giacovino from CJM, and he's going to go through more of the improvements that are proposed on the bridge itself.
Thanks, Tracy, and great job staying composed during the technical difficulties. So again, I'm Mike Giacovino. I work for Close, Jensen & Miller, or CJM, And we are the design engineers who are doing the portion of the path that's actually going to be on the Gold Star Bridge itself. And when I say Gold Star Bridge, there's actually two structures that carry the path. 2514A, the long one, that's what you think of when you think the southbound Gold Star Bridge. It's the large truss, big girder span. And over on the left-hand side of the photo is 2514B, which is a 3-span bridge that also carries the path. That bridge is the connector, it's the ramp from 95 southbound to Route 32. So here's a view of the 2514A bridge from the Groton side. So we're on the east side of the bridge, we're looking west. And the red line you see is the current alignment of the path. It's going to remain, at least on the bridge, about the same. You can see the dash lines where it goes over underneath the bridges to Bridge Street, off to the right in Riverview Ave, it circles up, and it's on the right-hand side of the Gold Star southbound bridge, as I'm sure you all know. And again, this is over on the New London side, still looking west. You can see the path stays on that right-hand side, and it goes up to that blue polygon in the top right-hand corner. That's the B bridge. So that's 2514B, just to give everyone a sense of what the site really looks like. So the path is going to remain on that right-hand side or on these cross sections. It's left because we're looking the other way in the bridge. But you're going to see a series of cross sections over the next few slides, and it's going to give you the existing section, which you see on the bottom, and the proposed section, which you see on the top. So this is what we're calling the typical section. This is valid for the majority of the main Gold Star Bridge. In its existing state, you have that give or take 5-foot wide pathway, a 10-foot shoulder, and 5 lanes southbound. What we're going to do is remove one of the southbound lanes, and we're going to widen the multi-use path to 14 feet wide. So you're going to have a 14-foot wide path, a metal bridge barrier, a 12-foot shoulder, and then 4 lanes of traffic. And this is another cross section still on the main Gold Star Bridge, just a little further closer to Groton. This one is in spans 29 and 30. So span 26 of the bridge actually begins to widen from the previous cross section we showed you, and it adds an extra lane. So existing, it's 6 lanes southbound and still that 5-foot pathway. We're removing one of those southbound lanes again. So it's going to be 5 southbound lanes, a 10-foot shoulder, the open bridge rail, and that 14-foot path. And that 14-foot path is maintained across the entire bridge, including the next one, which you'll see on the next slide. And this is that B bridge. This is the ramp from 95 South to Route 32. Currently, it's 2 lanes. It's going to reduce to 1 lane with a 10-foot shoulder, and again, our 14-foot wide path. So this 14-foot wide path is the nominal width. And like it does now, it is going to have 2 types of pinch points, which you'll see on the next slide. And the first one you'll see in the rendering on the left, which is the light poles. Currently, the light poles are mounted to the concrete barrier that separates the path from the roadway. So we don't have a concrete barrier anymore, and we need to still mount it behind that railing that we're putting up. So it's going to be about a 2-foot wide foundation. Now the path or that foundation, it's going to taper out and then taper back in, and that's 2 feet wide. So at those locations where you have light poles, it'll taper down to 12 feet. The other one are the large overhead sign supports, which you see on that rendering on the right. Those foundations are a little wider. They're 3 feet wide because the sign supports are so large. They're holding up those big giant green signs you see. There's 3 of these locations, span 7, 15, and 21. And at these locations, it's still going to taper out for 3 feet. You're going to have your sign support and taper back in. So the minimum width you're going to have over the whole bridge is 11 feet, which is more than double you have now. And it should give plenty of width for 2 bicyclists to pass with plenty of room in between. You know, I don't want anyone bumping handlebars. I actually walked across the bridge a couple weeks ago, and it's tight. I had, walk, and I had a bike come up behind me and a moped come up behind me. That's not going to be a problem anymore. Well, the mopeds we can't speak to, but it's going to be plenty wide. So in order to build this, and if you're wondering why it's coming on at the end of the project, it's because they have to build it from the top side. We're going to have 2 work zones. The top one you see is on the main bridge, the 2514A. The bottom one is on the B bridge. So at any given time on the main bridge, there's going to be a minimum of 3 lanes southbound. And on the ramp bridge, there's going to be 1 lane southbound. That work zone is going to be protected by a barrier. And what that's going to do is allow the contractor to do some of the work from on top of the bridge. They'll also be able to work from underneath the bridge on suspended work platforms. So those platforms are going to give them access from below. They're also going to serve as debris shields. And when they install those debris shields, there may be some temporary traffic impacts on local roads below, such as Fairview Ave in Groton, or on the New London side, State Pier Road. I think it's Cole Street is also over there. So during those time periods where they're installing these platforms, you're going to see something like a lane shift where they put a barrier down and they shift bidirectional traffic around it if the road's wide enough, or potentially alternating one way where they have a traffic person or an automated signal that's going to allow traffic to go from one direction, swap, and the other direction could go. So that'll be in place potentially during the erection of the work platforms. And then as this is all constructed, we're anticipating a 1.5-year window where they're working on the approaches and the bridge itself. During that time, the path in the immediate approaches and on the bridge will remain closed. And this is predominantly for safety concerns. It's going to be a very active construction site, and the contractor is actually going to be removing and rebuilding full portions of the deck. There's going to be no path. There's going to be no deck there. So during this 1.5-year or up to 1.5-year outage, there will be alternative measures for people to get across who do not have a vehicle or are not using their vehicle. It's going to be something similar to the shuttles that were in place during the outage when that fire closed the bridge or closed the pathway last spring. And with that, I'd like to kick it off to Stephen Frazier from BL to continue. Thanks.
Good evening, Steve Frazier with BL Companies. So BL, along with HNTB, designed the shared use path approaches to the Gold Star Bridge, as well as the intersection improvements at the Bridge Street intersection. So this is the portion of the presentation where we'll go over those improvements. Next slide. So you've seen this area before, but I wanted to highlight on the screen is the project area. And the portions that I'll be talking about in this part of the presentation are highlighted in red. On the left side of the screen, the New London side is the connection to Bailey Circle and William Street. And on the eastern side, the right-hand side of the screen is the improvements that are proposed in the Groton side, connecting Riverview Ave down to the Bridge Street intersection, as well as connecting up to the Gold Star Bridge. Next slide. So some of the existing conditions that are out there now, the top left photo is of the New London approach. The existing sidewalk out there is about 5 feet wide. It's concrete. It gradually comes up to the Gold Star Bridge from Bailey Circle at about 3.5%. And on the Groton side, the lower right-hand photo, it's an existing 5-foot wide concrete sidewalk as well. For the most part, it's at grade. However, I'm sure you're all familiar. This area is kind of the hairpin turn that is very steep. The existing grade is about 8.5% coming down from the Gold Star Bridge and winding around. Next slide. So I want to go through the improvements that we're proposing as part of the project. I'll start with the New London side first. So just to orient the colors here, the orange is a proposed 10-foot wide paved path. The green area coming off of it is about how far we would need to grade coming off of the paved path. So the existing path that's there now coming off the Gold Star Bridge will be removed and replaced with a 10-foot wide path all the way down to Bailey Circle. The other additional improvement is a side path that would connect from the main one down to William Street as an additional connection to the local area. And I want to highlight the kind of pinkish circle that's on here is an indication of, on the next slide, quick rendering. It's a conceptual view of what it might look like as if you're standing on that new shared use path, looking up kind of in the southeasterly direction towards the Gold Star Bridge. You can see on the left-hand side of this rendering that that's the new connection down to William Street that would be happening. Next slide. So as far as the improvements on the Groton side, again, same colors as the last slide. The orange is indicating where the proposed 10-foot wide paved path is going, and the green is how far the grades would need to extend beyond that. I want to highlight a couple areas here. First, it's largely remaining in the same location where it is now, being replaced with a wider path. The second thing I want to highlight is on the north side, that hairpin turn. We're extending the path toward the east coming off of the Gold Star Bridge to allow us to have a proposed grade as if you're coming down the hill at just under 5%. You know, to remind you, the existing grade is 8.5%. So it allows us to meet requirements and it's a safer path. We do anticipate the potential need for a retaining wall on the north side of that turn. The need would be to prevent any of the grading from extending onto private property. Also on the north side, we're replacing the connection to Riverview Ave. We're maintaining that connection, but we're going to reconstruct it with the 10-foot wide trail. And then the last part I want to highlight is as the shared use path winds its way going southward, kind of toward the bottom of the view you're looking at, the on and off ramps coming off of exit 85 are supported over the Amtrak Railroad. It's bridge 1639. The shared use path is going to be reconstructed on that. So we're basically keeping the out of the bridge, not changing the width of it, but we're going to remove the existing concrete sidewalk on it and widen into the road to allow for that 10-foot wide shared use path to cross the bridge. We're also going to provide a raised concrete buffer area between the shared use path and then the off ramp. And then the last piece is that off ramp. In order to accommodate that construction, we'll be reducing the off ramp to 1 lane as it crosses the Amtrak bridge to allow that shared use path to go through. These are some typical sections of the trail, but I'll briefly explain them. As I mentioned before, the proposed trail is 10 feet wide, paved. It will have 2-foot wide grass shoulders on both sides. We will be providing a 3-rail wood fence to discourage trail users from going off the trail and down a steep slope where it's warranted. We'll be providing a concrete barrier, a single slope concrete barrier between the shared use path and I-95 proper as the shared use path comes off the Gold Star Bridge on either side. Next one. And just to speak a little more on Bridge 1639. So just to remind you, this is the bridge that supports exit 85 on and off ramps over the Amtrak Railroad. So this is an existing image of what's out there now. On the left side, you can see the existing sidewalk. The overall bridge is in good condition. The superstructure was constructed in 1999. So what we're able to do for our proposed work is to remove that existing sidewalk and widen into the road, kind of toward the right-hand side of that view. And at the same time, we'll be removing one of the lanes of the off-ramp so that in that area, we'll have 1 lane of traffic coming off of the highway over the Amtrak bridge. On the next slide, it's a conceptual rendering of what that area might look like after construction. In the far background, I guess, of the view is the shared use path crossing the bridge. And then there's a small red strip. In this view, it's small, but that's the concrete buffer that's going to be raised, and that'll separate the 10-foot wide shared use path from the off ramp. In the foreground is a pedestrian crossing that's really associated with the Bridge Street intersection improvements. And with that, I think I'm going to hand it over to HNTB to go over the Bridge Street intersection improvements.
All right, so this here is just the existing conditions at the intersection. So there's Bridge Street, and we're labeling them here east and west just to help differentiate them. North Street and the I-95 on-off ramps. And in this whole area, it is essentially a bowl. The center of the intersection is lower than the surrounding approaches, which requires us to raise up the intersection in order to put in a roundabout. And so next slide. Oh, actually, sorry, can you go back one? I did want to highlight that currently the crossing widths at this intersection are really wide, which doesn't really invite people or encourage people to walk in this area. And there are only 2 legs of this currently have crosswalks. So again, not very connected. And there's just so much going on. It doesn't really lend itself to people wanting to, people don't feel safe crossing this area. So one of the things that we're proposing is a roundabout. And so now, next slides, thank you. So for our proposed design, we have a hybrid roundabout. So it's not quite a turbo roundabout because we have 2 lanes coming from North Street. They go around part of the roundabout and then onto exit 85. But most of the other approaches, it's 1 lane in each direction. As you can see here, that's really reducing the amount of the crossing distance at each approach. And we would be increasing the number of crosswalks. Also along here on the upper left corner, what was a bypass lane coming off of exit 85 is now being turned into that shared use path and also a more green area rather than having that bypass. And we tried to keep some of the existing parking over on the western portion of Bridge Street as well. The nice thing about roundabouts is that it really slows people down, and so that increases pedestrian safety. We have the shared use path coming off from exit 85, but along the roundabout in those thicker gray areas, those are 10-foot wide paths connecting all the way around for shared use path. And then it would be connecting and tapering down to 5-foot wide sidewalks at the approaches. And this is just an image of kind of a bird's eye image of the existing intersection. And if you click once, this is kind of a rendering of what this would look like approximately. You can see here that path that I was talking about now that's on the lower right corner would come around, and you can see where the crosswalks connect to those wider paths. And next slide, please. And this is on Bridge Street from the eastern side looking towards the west. Existing condition, again, really wide crossing areas. And this is a rendering of what it might look like in the proposed condition. And again, more narrow crossings, and as well as pedestrian islands and a truck apron and everything like that. So next slide. And I'm going to pass it off to Dave.
Thank you very much, Sam. Dave Gill, traffic engineer for HNTB, and we conducted analysis here to ensure the long-term viability and efficient operations of this intersection. Specifically, we looked at projections out to the year 2053. And so what we're looking at here on the left-hand side table, you don't have to get into the details, but we have a what we call a letter grade system for level of service. It's basically an expression of how efficiently traffic is flowing. Kind of like your grade school letters A through F, A being the best, F being failing, that's the worst. And what we're projecting here is overall, this intersection will be operating at level services A and B during the AM and PM peak hours, which are actually reflecting EB traffic. As we know, I know a couple people beforehand had expressed to me how busy it gets during those electric boat shift changes. We also have on the right-hand side another expression of traffic operations vehicle queues, essentially vehicles standing in line or parked in line trying to get through oftentimes a green light or at a signal, right? This is an expression of how long we're estimating what's called a 95th percentile queue, which is really almost about as long as queues get. And these queue lengths are very short compared to the estimated operations of a standard traffic signal. And the added benefit of this actually is that these queue lengths are not stagnant, like you're waiting at a red light. You're waiting for it to change and you're parked behind 10 cars. These queue lengths are actually dynamic. They're rolling, they're moving. As one vehicle is entering the roundabout, everybody keeps flowing in behind them. So it's a very dynamic process. You don't feel like you're waiting because you're constantly on the move. It becomes a much more kind of livable experience as opposed to a signal where you're waiting for that EB flow to come out of the south, which it's an important place, but they do tend to dominate the intersection. And this roundabout is going to be a great way to accommodate all of the users at this intersection, both vehicles as well as bicycles and pedestrians. As Sam noted, these are great means of slowing vehicles down and improving the accessibility through the intersection for all the users in the area. At this point, I'll pass it on. Thank you very much. Here's Steve.
All right, we're going to talk a little bit about the construction of the shared use path and Bridge Street improvements now. So the image on the screen is of the New London side of the shared use path. As mentioned previously, the shared use path as it crosses on the actual Gold Star Bridge itself will be closed during construction. So we anticipate that this portion of the shared use path to be constructed during that closure. So access from Bailey Circle to the Gold Star Bridge will not be provided during construction on the existing trail. It will be closed. And shuttle service would be provided to Groton. Next slide. Regarding the Groton side of the shared use path, I want to highlight a couple different areas here. As I mentioned previously, the shared use path access over the Gold Star Bridge, circled in red on the top, will be closed during construction. And that area we anticipate to be constructed during the closure of the path on the Gold Star Bridge. So kind of maximizing that closure area, or that closure time. The other two areas circled in red, we anticipate short-term duration closures of the shared use path between Bridge Street and Riverview Ave. The area in the middle red circle, we anticipate a short-term closure because of the improvements that are proposed under a separate project on the northbound bridge. And the lower circle we expect short-term closures for that to construct the shared use path under this project. Ultimately, we want to try to maintain access from Bridge Street to Riverview Ave as much as possible. So that will be an important aspect of the contract documents as well. And finally, during the closure where people cannot access the Gold Star Bridge shared use path itself, a shuttle will be provided to provide that access to New London. Next slide. So the improvements over that Amtrak bridge, Bridge 1639, will require a narrowing of the off-ramp that's there now. If you go to the next slide, these two slides are kind of meant to be pasted together, but it's meant to show that the traffic coming off of exit 85 will be shifted to the left-hand side of that off-ramp and reducing it down to one lane. And that will provide a construction work area around the curve and down across the bridge. So that will facilitate the shared use path construction itself, as well as the construction going on the Amtrak bridge. Next slide. And I'll hand it over to Rudy to go over the Bridge Street intersection construction.
Great. Thanks, Steve. Now, it's important to note that we are currently in preliminary. Oh, Important to note that we are currently in preliminary design, and what I'm going to be talking about next is the construction staging of the roundabout area. We are currently envisioning the project to take just under 2 construction seasons. And as the design of the roundabout gets refined, so will our construction sequencing of the project. That will also get refined. Also, we will try to minimize not only the vehicle detouring, but also the pedestrian detouring through the construction zones. We do anticipate that there will be some, but again, they will try to be minimized. While we've envisioned the construction to take just under 2 seasons, we are envisioning the project to be constructed in 4 different phases. And again, as the design gets refined, so will the construction sequencing. So with those 4 stages of construction, we might introduce some substages as well. So this is a rendering of the intersection during stage 1. This would probably be more of a pre-stage where we widen some of the roadways to be able to shift traffic over as needed. Next slide, please. We envision the project being constructed from the east and working our way to the west. The areas in orange are the areas that are that would be constructed. This is stage 2A, where as Samantha was describing earlier, we describe Bridge Street as Bridge Street East Approach and Bridge Street West Approach. In stage 2A, we would be constructing or closing down that one leg of Bridge Street East and providing a detour by way of Broad Street. And we would shift the traffic, the north and southbound traffic along North Street and the ramps, shift them over to the west so that all that work can get constructed. Another way to avoid this area would be also to take exit 87 to Route 349 to exit 3 and then back over to this area on Bridge Street. Next slide, please. This is what we would call stage 2B, where now we reopen that leg of Bridge Street, or what we were calling Bridge Street East. And we would divide that north and southbound traffic so that we can work on that center portion of North Street and also the ramps as well. Next slide, please. In stage 3, recognizing that there are businesses in this area, we would close Bridge Street West, but still maintain the business access through this area. We would also incorporate a detour to get around by way of Broad Street and Thames Street as well. But again, complete access during business hours, so there is no disruption to those businesses. And the traffic would then be shifted onto what would be the eastern side of North Street and the ramps, as well as the Bridge Street East leg. There's a lot of east and west. So that half of the project to the east is completely built and traffic is flowing through that area freely. And then finally in stage 4, next slide, please. In stage 4, all the 4 legs of the intersection are complete. We would open up the roundabout to a single lane use roundabout and complete the construction of the center circle. And lastly, do the final paving of the entire project.
So speaking briefly to the rights-of-way impacts that are anticipated for the project, it's really going to be minimal property impacts anticipated. As mentioned on the screen, we do anticipate the need for a retaining wall. And so a construction easement, a temporary easement, we're anticipating the need for that. All of this impact is based on assessing the GIS information that's out there. It's a publicly available approximation of existing property lines. It's not 100% accurate. So these impacts would need to be reevaluated once we have the completed survey in place. Go ahead. And I'll hand it over to Matt.
Thanks, Steve. I'm Matt Giannakopoulos. I'm a project coordinator with the Department's Division of Rights of Way. As Steve just mentioned, we anticipate that there may be the need for some temporary construction easements to be acquired in order to build the project. So I'm here tonight just to give a brief overview of our acquisition process in the event that is necessary. So first, when we talk about temporary easements, we call them construction easements. They're a type of property right that the department acquires when it needs to use private property in order to construct a project, but it doesn't need to use the property once construction of that project is completed. Like Steve said, we're going to work through the details once we get surveyed to assess the needs, but any necessary construction easements or any other property rights that are acquired for the project will be acquired in accordance with Connecticut General Statutes sections 13A-73, 13A-98E. And whenever there is federal money used in any phase of a project, the department must adhere to the Uniform Relocation Assistance and Real Properties Acquisition Policies Act of 1970. Next slide. So once the design has progressed further, we've done the survey, and we know exactly the extent of any property rights the department needs, and we're ready to begin the acquisition process. Each impacted property owner would receive a letter of intent to acquire, along with a property map, which will depict the exact rights to be acquired. At that point, we determine the fair market value of those rights. And we use that to establish an offer of just compensation. That offer then gets sent out to the property owner in writing, and a right-of-way agent from our office is available to meet with the property owner. They can explain, in greater detail the project, the impacts to their particular property, and explain how the department came up with that offer. Property owner would have a reasonable time to consider the offer and enter into negotiations. Once an agreement is reached, the DOT prepares all the necessary paperwork to transfer those rights. So they'll file a deed and the property map on the town land records, whatever town that happens to be in. However, if negotiations reach an impasse, in order to allow the department to proceed with building the project, it may acquire the rights it needs through its power of eminent domain. What happens in that event is the department files a notice in the local superior court, along with a monetary deposit in the amount of the department's offer. The property owner would have 6 months from that date to file an appeal if they thought that the offer was inadequate. Now, whether or not the owner chooses to use their right to appeal, they can apply to the court to withdraw that money at any time. So I know a lot of times people hear eminent domain, they think it means the state can just take the whole property for $1 and things like that. But the property owners are entitled to at least that original offer of just compensation, and the department can only take title to the rights it needs to allow the project to move forward. So in this case, we're talking temporary construction easements. No matter how those easements are acquired, once the construction is completed, the department files an affidavit on the land records that releases any temporary easements, and all rights revert back to the original owner. So thank you for allowing me that brief tangent. In the meantime, I'll be here to answer questions afterwards. I'm going to hand it over to Tracy to conclude.
Thank you, Matt. So we are anticipating some environmental permitting as part of this project. You can see them listed here. Even though we don't have any in-water work anticipated when working on the shared use path improvements on the southbound Gold Star Bridge, we do still need to coordinate with regulators, the Army Corps of Engineers, U.S. Coast Guard, DEEP, and we'll also have to coordinate with the Navy for any work over the navigation channel. There are possibly some temporary impacts to inland wetlands as well associated with the approach path design. We're currently flagging wetlands, and that'll be picked up in the survey that was mentioned. So as Rudy mentioned earlier, we're currently in the preliminary design phase, meaning we're at like a 30% level. So based on the current design, the construction cost is estimated to be $55.5 million. And as I mentioned previously, the construction start is anticipated to be in spring 2028 and be completed in fall 2029. So at this point, that wraps up our presentation, and we'd just really like to thank you all for taking the time to join us tonight, and your patience through the technical difficulties, and would just really like to hear your feedback on this project. This is a much needed project in the area. The department is working to provide bicycle and pedestrian improvements as part of our highway and bridge projects. So, with these improvements, a much safer path will be provided, and it'll provide better connections that kind of jive with what the cities of New London and Groton are proposing on their ends, to make better connectivity for bicyclists and pedestrians on both sides of the river. Based on some previous coordination between CTDOT and the Southeastern Connecticut Council of Government, it's estimated that 6,500 residents of New London and Groton commute by foot or by bicycle. So there's a lot of opportunity for more people to start using the bridge to get to both sides and check out restaurants and businesses on either side of the river. So we're hopeful that at the end of this project, a lot more people will be out there biking and walking and using this not only for commuting, but also recreational purposes. So at this point, and before we start, I'd just like to acknowledge that Representative Christine Connolly is here with us tonight. I don't know if there's anything you'd like to say to start out, or you don't have to.
Thank you. So I appreciate everyone who came from the community and everyone who came from DOT and corresponding contractors. I'm very excited to see improvements to the bridge. The bridge actually joins my district from Groton to New London together. So I travel the bridge daily, back and forth. I can't tell you how many times a day. I live at exit 86. So I actually, during the next lane changes and the northbound construction, my side of town will be substantially affected over the next couple of years. So one of my things is, how are we going to deal with construction fatigue? Because a lot of folks over the next few years will be dealing with the lane changes shifting over from southbound to northbound, and then more closures for this improvement project, which is a great improvement project. You're going to have a problem with folks just trying to get back and forth to work, to play, to restaurants. My office is in Groton. I work in Hartford. So there's no way to get to where I live, to where I work, without going over the bridge every day. Same with my spouse, works in New Haven. So we are constantly over the bridge back and forth. Another question, I did see some of the views about the guardrails on the pedestrian multi-use path. I think they do need to be strengthened. This bridge has been a bridge where folks have made poor decisions about their lives. And with the current with the current access for emergency services from the road bridge, you don't want people to find an easy way to make a poor decision. So I do recommend getting those barriers a lot stronger on the bridge side to protect our residents. I'd also, and I'm speaking on behalf of the full delegation, we'd like to see that traffic study reducing a lane. I understand that folks at DOT and folks on the construction side have done the traffic study, but we'd like to take a look at it and have some input, and maybe have a delegation meeting about how reducing a lane would affect things. As someone who actually has to go from 86 to the 32 intersection every day that I go to Hartford, crossing over those 5 lanes of traffic, seeing how many cars are there, I'm having a hard time perceptively seeing how that would work with one less lane of traffic. So we would like to be a partner to you in this. And the easements, we're in New London, so this is Keylog territory. We've had troubles with easements before. So the general resident discussion about easements is not going to be taken well. So I think that we need a lot of education, a lot of knowledge as to who's getting construction easement and who's looking at a permanent easement. So we're going to need those studies soon, and they're going to need to be clear, very clear as to whose private property rights are being affected. Again, we've had some really bad trouble with easements in this town, all the way up to the Supreme Court. And if you drive by, it's just now getting built. 25 years later, we're finally building on the property in New London. That being said, the safety improvements for bikers and walkers, huge and very well received. So I don't want to be negative. I want to be positive about these improvements. Just with the construction fatigue, with all we're about to go through over the next 2 to 3 years here, for people who just need to travel, we're going to need a lot of information. And I appreciate your visuals. No disrespect to the DOT, but these visuals were much more understandable than the usual engineering visuals we get. So I do appreciate them. Any more information you can get to the delegation that we can pass on to folks to have this robust public conversation, I think is really important for the community. And I appreciate everyone coming here, both from the government side and from the public side, to start talking about what our concerns are, what we're excited about, and what we need to just vet through a little bit.
No, thank you very much for starting off our Q&A session. I'm going to try to go through all the questions. So starting out with the construction fatigue, we understand that 4 years is a long time for continued construction. The positive is that with those 2 northbound lanes crossed over to the southbound bridge, that's going to stay in place for the 3 years. So it's not like we're shifting lanes around back and forth. Those 2 lanes will stay in that same location. The southbound lanes will remain in their location for those 3 years. And then the 2 lanes that remain on the northbound bridge, they will be shifted at one point, but it'll be, after a year and a half or so, and then they're shifted just slightly. So for the most part, we feel like, the first couple weeks might take some getting used to, but once the patterns are established, people will get used to the flow and know where they need to go. And we're hopeful that will maintain operations through there. We also have our district construction staff who will be on site. We're going to be implementing smart work zones to kind of monitor traffic operations and just make sure that if there are problems, maybe we can tweak it as they come up. Now for the shared use path, again, we looked at building it at the same time as the crossover being in place. However, for one, it would increase the duration that the shared use path construction on the bridge would be in place, because we'd have a narrower work zone for the contractor, and you have traffic right up against that work zone. So the access would be difficult. The contractor would have to do the work mostly at night. So that's why we're proposing to put it in after the crossover, start the construction in 2028. To not only speed up the work, we can build it a lot faster in that sense, because the contractor will have the work zone, but it also provides a much safer roadway for the commuting public and also the construction workers. We did a safety analysis that determined that a 10-foot wide right shoulder is one of the safest options, because it provides enough width for trucks, broken down vehicles, or emergency vehicles to pull over without, going into the adjacent lane. So there are fewer accidents that would be anticipated. So we're really trying to reduce that shared use path construction duration. But during that time, 4 lanes of I-95 northbound traffic will still be available on the northbound bridge. And then we'd still have 3 lanes of I-95 southbound traffic on the southbound bridge while the shared use path is being constructed. So I know it's a long time. We're going to keep the website running and post construction updates. We will get a mailing list going and reach out to people to make sure that you're aware of when the crossover is starting, when some of these detours are going to be in place. Also when the shared use path construction will start, and when we would be looking to shut down the path and start doing the shuttling. I apologize. The second question You talked about the bridge rail, and I assure you that the new bridge rail that's to be installed is it is crash tested for like the biggest trucks we have out there, and they've done testing and it shows that even when a big truck hits it, it doesn't deflect much. So that railing that we're proposing between the vehicular traffic and the pedestrians is proposed to be 54 inches high. So that'll provide a little extra height and protection for those that are on the shared use path. And then on the outside face, we're proposing a similar open metal rail that will also be of the same strength. And then an anti-climb mesh fence that'll be 10 feet tall to try to deter people from climbing and jumping. The easements, yes. So we yes, are happy to meet with the property owner and kind of walk through. Again, as they mentioned, these are just temporary construction easements. The retaining wall itself that needs to be built is anticipated to be within the right of way of the state. But to gain access, the contractor might need to go onto this private property. So it's really just that temporary use and then restoring it at the end of it. But did I cover all your questions? Yeah. Oh. Yeah. Yeah, you can either come up or we have one that we can pass.
My name is Brian Kent and I am president of Bike Groton. So we are the principal bicycle and pedestrian advocacy organization on the Groton side. We partner with Bike New London, who's also represented here tonight. I'm also vice chair of the Connecticut Pedestrian Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Board. And our group meets monthly with DOT, and we've been aware of this project for a number of years. And I would just like to commend the department and the design and engineering team for the solution that has been presented tonight. It's much superior to previous conceptual plans that we've seen in the past. So that said, I'd like to recommend that you enhance this presentation going forward by showing in plan view what will be the lane changes on the southbound side, because I think there might have been, it might have been hard for some folks to understand what you're actually planning to do when you describe lane reductions, because in my understanding is you're not reducing travel through lanes, you're reducing exit on and off lanes to create the pathway. So I think it would be very helpful if you actually have diagrams in addition to the sections. Your cross sections show the changes, but we're not seeing anything in plan view that really helps us conceptualize, visualize what the differences will be. So I want to talk about the landing areas on both the New London side and the Groton side. We'll start in New London, where you have added a pathway to William Street, which is a really great addition to the plan. Understand that you really didn't have to do that, so it's an enhancement. It makes a lot of sense, especially for commuters who are traveling into New London, city of New London. This provides them with a way to get down onto William Street more directly. The challenge there, though, is that William Street has no safe facilities. And so my suggestion is you look for ways to increase the scope of work, or at least the coordination with improvements on William Street, which is of course a state highway. It's Route 635. So it's under your control. And where the pathway you show intersects William Street would be a mid-block crossing. I don't think the sight lines are great there because it's on a curve. So I really think you need to look at that closely and avoid creating a dangerous situation for cyclists who are approaching William Street and would be in a tough spot to turn into the city of New London there and go underneath all of the overpasses. William Street is 50 feet wide and it's only 2 lanes. So there's plenty of space for buffered bike lanes. You could even do grade separated bike lanes under all of the overpasses and really enhance your facility there. I think that would be a great enhancement. If not part of this project, certainly coordinate with a William Street improvement project. Also, please include wayfinding so that folks on bicycles are given the same kind of information that people driving cars are given, you know, where they're going, what the distances are and that sort of thing. And include lighting for the pathways. And while you're on the bridge, it would be helpful if there's some sort of, we refer to mile markers, but in this case, I think they might be 10th mile markers. It'd be much easier if we were in the metric system, but so that if somebody has an issue on the bridge or there's an emergency and they're calling 911, they can identify where they are on this mile-long bridge. I think that would be very helpful. On the Groton side, the existing, the existing and the new ramp pathway down onto the bottom of Riverview is steep, even though you're changing the grades. I would recommend that you look at connecting further east, in addition, like you're doing on the William Street spur, to the Riverview right-of-way where it intersects the I-95 right-of-way further east, because they touch each other, and you could easily extend a pathway spur. If you're not going to the city of Groton or coming from the city of Groton, you're going to the town of Groton, and you're going up to Route 12 and beyond, and that is your pathway. So it's a direct route. So please look at that. And lastly, at the roundabout. Roundabouts are perfect opportunities to create gateways, to create statements of community identity. And this roundabout, it's a fantastic solution. Effectively, it's a gateway to the city of Groton. And in that enormous green space in the center, there should be a landmark, there should be public art of some kind, there should be enhanced landscape design beyond just the green circle. And I know at this point in preliminary design, you're not worrying about that, but I don't know if there's any scope in your plans to include that kind of design, but you certainly should be thinking about it because it's a great opportunity, and it would be sad if it wasn't taken advantage of. So thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments and suggestions. That's good. We will be coordinating further with both New London and Groton. And we've talked about improvements at that roundabout and that green space. I mean, I think that would be something to discuss further with Groton as to what they want. And if it's, more of an improvement, we might look to get city funding to help pay for some of those improvements in the roundabout. So if it's like a sculpture or something like that, but we will coordinate with them further as we progress into final design. You make a good point about the plan view for the line striping at the end. We have future design submissions coming up, and we'll be sharing those plans and making it available on our website. So we will share those. It's primarily, there are 2 lanes coming on from Bridge Street onto I-95 southbound. We're just going to take one of those lanes. So it's just the one lane merging on at the east end of the southbound bridge. And then when you get to the main spans over the water, it's going to reduce to 4 lanes there and then open up to 5 to have the exit ramp to 80 or to 32 on the west side. But we'll provide better plans so you can all see and the traffic study. Yes. Sure, please.
Just speak to the mid-block crossing for the connection down to Williams. Right now, what we're proposing is coming from the main path, coming down to Williams Street, and we'll be able to provide a bike ramp that will connect to kind of the southbound side of Williams Street. There will also be a bike ramp on kind of on the other side of that connection to allow people who are kind of north of that connection coming southbound to turn right onto that bike ramp and then up the connection to make it up to the main line path. So right now, our proposal doesn't include a crossing to bring people from that side of Williams Street to, I guess, the east side. So in the scenario that's there now, bicyclists, instead of crossing the road at an unmarked crossing or at a mid-block crossing, they would need to continue northward to Bailey Circle and connect onto the path where it exists today. We are also aware that there is a potential it's a pedestrian improvements project going down William Street. It's early on in the planning stages, I think. So we'll be sure to coordinate with that team and that project because there may be some opportunities to make sure that our project is touching down at the right spots that will work well with that future project. And you mentioned wayfinding signage. Part of the advancing of the design of the project is to include signage, not just for vehicles, but also for trail users. So that will be part of something that's considered as the design advances. And then lighting for the pathways, that's certainly a consideration that is being weighed right now. And obviously there's lighting, I believe, on the bridge itself. So it's really the path coming down from the bridge to the, both on New London and Groton. So that's something that's going to be weighed and considered. I think we are leaning towards including it, but it's a funding issue that we want to make sure that we're accommodating.
Thank you. Yes, Julie.
Yeah, good evening. Those of you who don't know me, I'm Rob Bryce. I'm the president of Bike New London, and we're both a advocacy organization for cycling safety, and we run a community bike shop, which is in Hodges Square, looking directly at the right at the railings of the present walkway. A couple of things, and they're kind of all over the map on some things, but one of the things we learned when we experienced the closure of the bike lane due to the fire last year, it took a while for that bus service to be established to get any kind of shuttle service. If that is, I'm assuming that would be what is done when we have the closures for the construction. That needs to be more than one bus per hour that can accommodate 2 bikes. And it needs to be more hours than just 8 or 10 hours a day. People have to get to work at Electric Boat at 6 a.m. They get out second shift. The bridge is used all times of the day, and it's used by more than a couple of bikes per hour. So that needs to be planned for. You've got 5 years to do it. So I think you probably can make it happen. One of the things I noticed on the safer highways on your handout, it says that you could allow inspection and maintenance vehicles to use the new access. And I'm just wondering how often that will be done and if the path will then be closed while you have inspection trucks up and down the walkway or bike lane. And I'm assuming that they'd have to enter from the New London side if they actually were to get into that, unless there's a gate somewhere. And then probably can't get out the Groton side the way it's configured. So if that's going to be a potential use of it, you probably need to plan for closures of the lane when your inspections are going to happen. And I'm sure that'll confuse some commuters using it. The other question I had, there was mention about the wait times planned at your study of the traffic circle in Groton. I'm not a fan of traffic circles, roundabouts, whatever you want to call them. From the point of view of pedestrians and bicyclists, I know how much the state DOT likes to install them or plan for them. And I see the advantages from the point of view of being behind a windshield. If you're in a car or truck and you don't have to wait so long at a red light, yeah, that can be a good thing. But it very, very often means uncontrolled crossings for pedestrians or bikes to use any of the proposed sidewalks or crossings at those roundabouts where traffic just never stops. And if you've even been at the what do you call it? The not the privileged traffic, not the common traffic at the Route 8, the Salem Four Corners intersection, you know that traffic might wait a long time to get through when the traffic circles are busy. And I can only imagine someone like my friend here who commutes from North Street to that lane every day, trying to get across that little traffic, that roundabout. And will there be any signals, any kind of actual traffic signals that would stop traffic, or do you just have to take your chances across the EB commuter traffic in the mornings and afternoons? If you're not in the preferred direction, that could be a really, really tricky crossing to make, because everybody knows that despite your best plans for traffic calming, everybody drives as fast as they can through those things. And 2-lane roundabouts are tricky enough for drivers to not bang into each other. Trying to get across it on a bicycle is really tough. It's really difficult. So again, I'm not a fan of them. I like 4-way intersections with traffic lights and walk signals. I just spent a weekend in Philadelphia and it had fantastic accommodations for bicycles and bike lanes, bus lanes all through the city. And it worked really well. We rented bikes and we rode all over the city, and I never felt like I was in danger. And I think here's an opportunity here to make this safer. I don't know that the roundabout does that when it's just based on the traffic volumes going through there and traffic that never stops for a pedestrian or bicyclist. So again, I'm not a fan of that. I hope it is planned correctly in the design. And then the last question I had was that 5 years is a long time. So we're looking at over 5 years for the completion of this. And I'm just wondering if the funding for it is locked in, or if there are things that could make this, end up with the getting the plug pulled on this whole project between now and 2029. That's my last question. Thank you.
Okay. No, thank you. We'll kind of walk
Yeah,
through.
I'll start off.
Yeah, on the round.
Yeah, I'm the traffic guy, so I'll start there. So great question. Obviously we've all seen the traffic here coming out of EB, right? It is a steady stream, especially that peak hour, right? The shift change. It's it's very intense. And actually part of the discussion of this roundabout with DOT is what is the preferred way to make those sidewalks, the crosswalks specifically, safer, right? So we are considering potentially raised crosswalks. We are considering rapid rectangular flashing beacons. There's potential even for pedestrian hybrid beacons, which is basically an over the head signal. I don't know if you've been to the Cape recently, but one of the exits off of Route 25 comes right into what's called Belmont Circle, and it has those pedestrian hybrid beacons. It's the same idea. So yes, that is part of the consideration right now. Still a lot of work to be done to get there. We're at 30% preliminary design, but we will certainly get there. And that's absolutely the most important question here is safety. That's always at the forefront. So we appreciate that. See if there's anything else I could tackle on that for you. The bus service, right? That's something that certainly we'll be looking to make sure it's meeting the needs. You know, we saw from that exact example you're referencing, right? That unfortunate fire last year. We did see what was requested to be serviced at the time. It looked like it was more often than once per hour, but clearly it didn't meet the needs if everyone has this experience that, oh, it wasn't there for us, right? So that's something that we'll have to look into, see what happened there. Maybe there's you know, something that it didn't quite happen the way it was supposed to, but that's absolutely going to be part of the next phase as well. So. Yeah. Physically, there's hard curbs in place that make it so vehicles need to curve a certain way and slow down. If it's a kind of something fun that we get to do called a fastest path or racing line, they call it in New York assessment, where literally it's kind of like a race car where they try to, you know, figure as a driver your quickest way through there. And we close those down. We close those paths down so that physically they cannot drive faster than what we're designing for, which is generally 20 to 25 entering and 15 to 20 miles an hour circulating through the roundabout. And you're right, though, that 2 lanes is a little bit different. And what we are doing at this specific roundabout is something a little bit it's geared towards trying to address that. Actually, we're dividing the lanes. If you look closely at the concept, there's actually a small division between the 2 through lanes. And so that's one of the ways that'll help reduce side swipe type crashes through the intersection, or sometimes lane changing when people are trying to circulate, getting into a different lane, causing a rear end or a side swipe or something like that. So yeah, we're absolutely thinking about that as well. And it's something that's going to be further fleshed out.
And just to address some of your other questions about the inspections and maintenance work. So the inspections occur every 2 years, and the inspectors use a under bridge truck it's called a snooper, and it has the bucket that goes underneath the bridge. It would just be one truck, one location, and we've coordinated with our bridge inspection team. The truck's narrow enough that if parked in the 14-foot wide areas, which will be most of the length on the bridge, there would still be room for bicyclists and pedestrians to pass. We would just have to have flaggers, and we're coordinating with them to make sure that there would be flaggers in place to warn people to go around. Same with the maintenance vehicles. You know, at this point, because we're proposing to replace the deck in that section, we're installing new railing, new fence that I think is stainless steel. We're proposing stainless steel. So the idea is that it'll be less maintenance, at least in the immediate future and going forward. So we don't anticipate lots of maintenance vehicles needing to go up there. It would be in an incident like the fire or something like that, where they have to fix something immediately.
And another portion of that whole maintenance question, actually, something early on in this process, we heard a lot about the snow removal. So that'll be a lot easier to do with this widened path. That way this path will get cleared more easily, more frequently, and just overall better maintenance.
I'm a big fan of roundabouts, but I've lived in Spain in a city that only has roundabouts instead of the four-way intersections. And I do love them, but there they always have traffic lights incorporated with them, which is just a suggestion that you maybe might not have looked at because we don't usually do them here. But I do think it's a missed opportunity to not have a bike lane with this roundabout, especially on the Groton side. And you could maybe have traffic lights for the bike lanes too, if it's, a high use area for bikes. I just think it's kind of overlooked here. We don't usually include those two things together, but it's like a dream if it works well. So just look into it.
Thank you. But sure. Yeah, so typically what we like to do here with the roundabouts is instead of letting the bikes circulate through the roundabout, we would have a bike ramp to join the shared use path, which circumnavigates the roundabout. So that would be the intent here. Bike lanes are absolutely a potential on the approaches coming in from Bridge Street or North Street. I know that's something the city is actually very keen on as well. So that, as we move forward, we're going to be continuing coordinating with the city. And as the opportunities arise, it'll be modified if possible. So.
I don't have so much a question, but just more of a statement. If this whole project is, the main concern is safety for the pedestrians and cyclists, the lighting does need to be installed. Because I've ridden over that bridge many times between 12 a.m. and 5 a.m. And there are those spots off of the bridge are extremely, extremely dark. I mean, granted, I have lights, but it's very dark. I mean, just a case in point, one night there was a flatbed wrecker parked directly over the top of the bike path that's currently there. And it was painted black rather than silver. And if I didn't have lighting myself, I would have never seen it. And it was, it was right at head level when you're on a bicycle. So those areas just, really, really need lighting. Thank you.
Absolutely, that will be part of the consideration.
Yep, absolutely.
Well, I think it's all about prioritization, right? And safety is paramount here, so.
I apologize. I remembered your other question about funding being available. Yes, we have the federal funding we're planning for it over the 5 years or so of construction. And we will have that grant money available for construction. It's contingent upon delivering this project and the Northbound project. So we're working hard to get the Northbound project design completed at the end of this year, and then this shared use path project in 2025 to meet those goals.
I have a concern if you have the railing separating the shared use path and the highway. we currently have the Jersey barrier, and the Jersey barrier, I think, keeps a lot of debris off the shared use, our current shared use path, where the debris kind of piles up on the highway side of that Jersey barrier.
Yeah, that's a good question. So as Tracy sort of got into with that crash barrier, it's what we call a test level 5, a TL5, which is the highest crash rating. It means it's very strong, and the rails that actually go across it have pretty tight spacing. The way it's designed is for impacts at angles. And remember, there's also a 12 or 10-foot shoulder here. We think it's very unlikely that an impact would lead to debris spraying through, especially given the tightness of these railings. And with the width of the path, you have another 14 feet of buffer should anything make it through. We just don't think it's going to be anything, major. It's a big beefy rail, and it's there to stop stuff. So.
Why make that a forest area? Why even have spaces there? If debris shoots off, I mean, there's a couple of debris shooting off. Why even have that being open?
So it was well, one factor was trying to keep it so it seemed more open, rather than I guess confined. When we have all the fencing and the concrete walls, it can feel a little more restrictive. And considering, as Mike said, that this is like a test level 5 system that when crash tested, like barely moved, we figured this was a really safe option. And again,
Sorry, I just want to jump in here too. We're also doing the structural analysis of the bridge. And on long span bridges such as this, one of the main considerations for load carrying capacity is what we call dead load. So dead load is the weight of the bridge and everything on the bridge itself. So by going from a concrete barrier down to this open metal rail barrier, we're saving in the ballpark about 500 to 600 pounds per linear foot. So over these spans that are pushing, I saw someone say, wow, over these spans are pushing 300 feet long, that really adds up. And it reduces the need to strengthen specifically the truss spans. So if you saw on the graphic before showing the schedule, there's one little blip in there that's southbound steel strengthening. That's part of it's another project number, but it's done through Close, Jensen, and Miller as well. And we're actually going out ahead to strengthen the bridge so that the path can be constructed and the northbound crossover can take place. So it's a combination of it is strong and reducing weight on the structure itself in order to build this path. Good question though, yeah.
yes. So the idea is that the new railing on the northbound structure and the railing along the sidewalk on the southbound structure will be matching. And right now we're still evaluating the concrete barrier that's on the south side of the southbound bridge that has that picket aluminum fencing. We're evaluating that because when we remove that barrier, we need to make sure that the new one is anchored properly to the deck and can withstand any impact forces that, for the major trucks that we anticipate on 95. So when we get into that kind of work, then sometimes we have to build more of the deck on that side. So we're taking a look at it a little bit further to see if that's something that we could do as part of this project or in a future rehabilitation. But yes, on the outer face along the sidewalk, we're proposing this steel mesh, which is basically like see-through. You can see through it very clearly. It doesn't obstruct the view of the river. So that's kind of why it was chosen.
Barrier, now where the Jersey barrier is, it separates the path from travel lane with a motor vehicle car. That's going to be 4 inches high, so 4.5 feet. What is it's vertical rails right there? There's vertical posts that.
Zoom here. It's a good question. It's vertical posts that give some of the strength at respacing. There's horizontal rails in between. There's continuous horizontal rails. Off the top of my head, I don't have the spacing. It's on the matter of a couple inches at the widest. You know, it's yeah. So it's you know you're not talking feet here. It's a couple inch gap. Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, it is higher than the existing. It's higher than the existing, and it's probably stronger than the existing, given it's a test level 5. Yeah, it's and lighter. Lighter's the big part. Looks nice too. Oh, right. Yeah. So it is dual sided. There's going to be a rub rail on the backside, on the shared use path side, for bicycle handlebars as well. So there's a curb and there's going to be a rub rail. Height wise. Oh, the railing itself is going to be able to stop any truck tires that would, God forbid, come flying off. Yeah, this thing is it's crash tested with a rather large truck going at highway speeds directly at it. So the tire shouldn't be a problem. But as far as the curb itself goes, I believe it's 6 to 7 inches high. It's standardized for that type of rail. There is a rendered view, yeah. Quite a few slides back. Shannon, would you mind oh, sorry. Be towards the end of my part. Yeah, sorry, it's a while back. Right here. So there's 2 rails. If you're looking at the screens, there's 2 rails to see here. The one in question is on the left-hand side. The render doesn't exactly match it. It's a 4 rail system, I believe, what we're dealing with here. But you get a good view of the one on the outside face. It's not a test level 5, but you could see in the rendering on the right-hand side of the rendering, it's a pretty small gap. Again, it's not the exact rail in the rendering, but it kind of gives you an idea of what it will look like. Yeah.
Yes. Yep. We'll post it on the website by the end of the week. We'll also have a link to the presentation, the recording of the presentation and everything, so you can re-listen.
Sure. The renderings that we're looking at right now on the water side, those are railings right there. 1, 2, 3, sort of like steps.
So the anti-climb rail begins at the top of that railing on the outside.
Yeah.
So those rails on the outside have to be there because inspection vehicles. We're putting inspection vehicles and pickup trucks for snow removal. So we have to have a crash tested rail on that outside. You can't have something that a truck can, in a snowstorm or just miss and go. But I believe it's I want to say 10 feet above the top of it, 8 feet above the top of it is how far the anti-climb fence.
Yep. So as Mike mentioned, the top of the fence is supposed to be 10 feet from the surface. And so that's about 5.5 feet above that top rail of the railing. So with,
It's not a stiff fence also. It's an
It's-
anti-climb fence. It's not stiff. It's to avoid someone. You probably couldn't sit on, you can't really sit on top of it. It's keeps you from climbing. Yeah. Hopefully not.
yeah.
Sorry, one more comment about the rails. The current rail on the, that separates the, on top of the Jersey barrier, there's a rail. And on the Jersey barrier, there's like bolts and connectors and stuff where they're at the perfect height where if you aren't careful, you could crash your bike handlebars right into there and have a really nasty crash. So these look to be much nicer where hopefully there's not the same type of thing where if you hit the rail at a steep enough angle, then you'll just slide along it, hopefully with this design.
Right. So, yep. So
Yep.
to answer the initial question, both those rails that you see, and again, these are just renderings. They're not exact models of what will be out there. There's going to be what we call bicycle rub rails that are set at about handlebar height for that exact intent. If you know you need to steer or you slide, that's there so your handlebar doesn't snag, so you don't get grabbed and thrown off. So they're to prevent that. And like as this gentleman pointed out, given the extra width, ideally, you know, people aren't hugging the sides of this thing. It should be plenty wide for everybody to use it and pass by without having to do so. But just in case, the rub rails are there.
You know, if that path is going to be bi-directional, is there going to be any type of striping on it? Oh.
Yep.
There will be?
Yep. Yes.
That's a yes. So there will be. Didn't make it through to the bridge people yet, but yeah, it was. And as Karen pointed out, it was on some of the other images showing the approach pathways, et cetera. Yep. No, it's a great question. That's what we're here for.
Yeah. Any other questions? If not. All right. Yes, thank you, Shannon. So just as a reminder, if you think of anything after this meeting, you can contact us through that email address or by phone and leave a voicemail and we will respond to you. Yeah, and again, the comment period's open through July 8th. So please send us any other questions or comments. So thank you all again for joining us tonight. We really appreciate all your feedback.